This man swam in a cave but never returned, and a few years later the police found out the shocking truth. After going through financial difficulty and being $50,000 in debt, Ben McDonald needed an escape from reality. He decided to go explore the caves at a nearby park called Vortex Spring. Even though a certificate was required to go cave diving, he jumped in the water in the restricted zone anyway, and 2 of the park employees seen him go into it, but he wasn't spotted at his house for the next 2 days. His truck was still parked outside of the park with his wallet in it, and none of his neighbors had seen him. The local authorities began a search and rescue in the entire park, but after weeks of searching they still hadn't found anything, so they called an expert cave diver named Ed Sorensen. The police were sure he would find his body because he was diving deeper than they had gone before, but he couldn't find anything and the case was classed as an unsolved mystery, until a few years later when a park employee was mysteriously murdered. Apparently he had heard information about Ben's disappearance, which was actually a murder. The reason why none of Ben's remains were found is because they were removed from the crime scene, and the 2 park employees were paid by someone to leave before Ben returned to the surface. Many people believe he was killed because he got into illegal activity trying to pay off his debt. This man hasn't lowered his arm in almost 50 years. His name is Amar, and he felt the temptation to do things that weren't permitted as a monk. So that's when he decided to do something drastic to help develop his religious beliefs. So in 1973, he decided to leave his job at a bank in India, and also his wife and 3 children, to raise his hand and hold it up for the rest of his life, because he wanted to show faith and appreciation to Shiva, who's the supreme god. At first he had terrible pains in his arm, but after 2 years he started losing feeling in his arm and the pain went away. But now people think that he's lost all blood circulation in his arm, and that if he decided he wanted to use his arm one day, he wouldn't be able to. How KFC was made from a gas station recipe. When Harlan Sanders was 6 years old, his father passed away, so his mother had to work while he took care of his siblings. In 1930, he got offered a job at the Shell oil company to manage a gas station. He quickly got the idea to make more money by making food for drivers passing through the gas station. His food, especially his fried chicken, became very famous. He came up with a technique to reduce the cooking time of the chicken, and also experimented with different spices until he got the flavor that he wanted. He then called it the secret blend of 11 herbs and spices. In 1950, he had to sell his place because of the construction of a new highway, which decreased his customers, which decreased his sales, leaving him in debt. After this, he got the great idea to create the franchise Kentucky Fried Chicken. He drove around the country selling his recipe and preparation technique to different companies in exchange for 4 cents per 1 chicken sold. By 1963, there were more than 600 franchises throughout United States and Canada. And finally, when he was 73 years old, he sold his franchise to an investment group for what would be over $14 million today. You won't believe what this man actually did. Nico Jenkins is an American born on September 16th, 1986. At the age of 15, he stole a car and the cops caught him, and he was then sentenced to 7 years in prison. But because of his bad behavior, it ended up being 10.5 years. After being released in 2013, not even a month had gone by before he turned from a thief to a murderer, committing 4 murders with a shotgun. He confessed to the murders during an interview with the police. He said the reason he executed them was done as a sacrifice to the ancient Egyptian god Apopis. In April 2014, he was found guilty of the 4 murders by a judge. He was also ordered to be put in a psychiatric hospital, but it didn't go through, so he was treated by doctors in prison. In May 2017, he was sentenced to death and 450 years in prison by 3 judges. In 2020, his appeal was denied, and to this day, his death sentence hasn't been carried out. Tricks that cops don't want you to know. In lots of countries, police are allowed to tell lies, if necessary, to obtain information they believe may be relevant. You have the right to record as long as you're not under arrest. You can also ask for identification, and they can force you to erase the video without a warrant. The requests an officer makes to you aren't in order. For example, if they don't have a warrant to search your car, then it's within your rights to refuse. But it's better to let them do it if you have nothing to hide, because you'll most likely be detained until they get a warrant. The best thing to do in dealing with the police is to act calmly, because if you're nervous or have a defensive attitude, it'll keep them on their toes and the situation may become more difficult. Finally, police officers may use false evidence to try and trick you into admitting the crime. For example, they may use a fake lie detector on a suspect to try and get them to admit or not admit the crime that they are being charged with. 3 places you should never swim. One of the rivers that you should never set foot in is Bubbly Creek, located in Chicago. In the 1900s, American meatpacking companies drained their waste into this creek, which caused really toxic fumes due to the decomposition of animal organs and blood. Not even a fish could survive in this creek. In Thailand, there's one area that causes concern called the Sa Mason Hole. It's a really deep underwater cave, which causes bad visibility for whoever swims there. So unless you want to get lost in the sea, I don't recommend swimming there. The last place is called the Amazon Basin in South America. It's drained by the Amazon River and has lots of predatory animals, like caimans, barracudas, piranhas, and deadly candiru fish, which is attracted by urine and can get into your urinary tract and cause a lot of pain. 5 photos you'll have to look at twice. At first it looks like one of the thumbs from Spy Kids, but it's actually just a sausage hanging from string in front of a man. At first it looks like this bartender's wearing a dress, but it's actually just a giant mirror on the counter showing the customer. At first it looks like this rock is floating in the air, but it's actually in water and the sky's just reflecting off of it. At first it looks like this guy's a giant on the beach, but he's actually just balancing on a tightrope. Now before I show you the craziest one, I found this app that makes your Snapchat score look like this and your Snap score look like this. Just press the button on my profile to get it. Finally, at first this just looks like a brick wall, but if you look close enough in the middle you can see a cigar. Now comment below if you've seen the Star Wars character that I hid in the video.